They do not appear in school textbooks. Their names are not carved into monuments. Their victories are not celebrated on national holidays. And yet, the world you wake up to every day was shaped by decisions made by them, in absolute silence, thousands of kilometers away from any flag. While official history speaks of presidents, generals, and treaties, there is another history running underneath it all. A history of doors breached before dawn, of maps burned after missions of bodies never identified, and of wars that ended before they were ever declared. This is not a tale of glorious battles. It is a descent into the untold operations of history's deadliest military units, men trained to act where politics fail, to win where diplomacy cannot reach, and to disappear when the world demands plausible denial. Because every civilization that has survived has done so thanks to decisions that could never be admitted in public. And those decisions have always had From the moment human societies organized themselves into states, a fundamental contradiction emerged. Not every action necessary for a nation's survival can be openly claimed by it. Ancient empires already understood this. Assassins sent ahead of invasions, silent sabotage, bribery, strategic disappearances. But it was in the 20th century, with the rise of industrial warfare, global public opinion, and nuclear fear, that this logic became doctrine. Invisible war was born, a war without recognizable uniforms, without declared fronts, without official communiques, a war where absolute success meant no one would ever know it had taken place. To fight this kind of war, traditional armies were useless. Something else was required, something small, flexible, ruthlessly efficient. That is how units came into existence that officially did not exist at all. Forces whose mere mention caused discomfort in parliaments and silence at press conferences. During the Second World War, while the world watched armored divisions advance across Europe and fleets clash at sea, a small group of British soldiers began operating outside every known convention. The Special Air Service was not born as an elite force, but as a desperate experiment, a risky idea at a moment of strategic desperation. The concept was simple and almost absurd. Small teams operating deep behind enemy lines could inflict more strategic damage than large conventional attacks. In the deserts of North Africa, these men traveled hundreds of kilometers in improvised vehicles, carrying explosives, rationed water, and the certainty that if captured, survival was unlikely. They did not seek open combat. Their targets were airfields, fuel depots, and communication lines. In one little documented operation, SAS teams did more than destroy aircraft on the ground. They compromised entire fuel supply systems, creating an invisible chain of mechanical failures that would bring planes down weeks later. Pilots died without ever knowing they had been condemned by men they would never see. Officially, nothing happened. Unofficially, the air balance of an entire campaign was altered. This logic of few men, disproportionate impact, and total denial became the model. After the war, the world entered a permanent state of tension. The Cold War was fought not only with tanks and missiles, but with information, influence, and fear. In this environment, the United States realized it needed a tool capable of acting without leaving fingerprints. Thus was born a unit whose very existence was denied for years. Delta Force, unlike conventional forces, its operators were selected not only for physical ability, but for their capacity to operate in isolation, to make impossible ethical decisions in seconds, and to accept that if something went wrong, the government would never confirm they had been there. One of the most obscure operations attributed to Delta Force took place in a country officially considered neutral, where foreign intelligence networks operated in the shadows. In less than 3 days, communication centers were neutralized, archives vanished, and key individuals simply disappeared from the geopolitical chessboard. There was no invasion, no bombing. Months later, governments collapsed, alliances fractured, and analysts struggled to explain sudden shifts without ever seeing the invisible hand that caused them. At the same time, another dimension of invisible warfare was unfolding at sea. The ocean has always been a space of legal ambiguity, and it was there that the United States refined some of its most sensitive operations. The SEAL Team 6, known internally as was created to confront extreme threats, but quickly became a strategic instrument for missions that could not be acknowledged. Long before its public notoriety, the unit was already conducting night boardings of vessels with unclear registration, intercepting cargo that could not be allowed to reach its destination, and carrying out coastal infiltrations in countries where there was officially no American military presence. In one such mission, a cargo ship was crossing international waters, carrying material capable of altering a regional balance of power. The boarding took place without gunfire, without explosions, and without distress signals. When the ship reappeared weeks later, it was empty. No statements were issued, no investigation progressed. But the cargo never surfaced in any global market. Sometimes, preventing a war means silently removing the object that would have started it. On the other side of the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union developed its own philosophy of special operations. Spetsnaz was not merely an elite unit. It was a direct extension of Soviet strategic thought. Its operators were trained to act before, during, and after declared conflicts, often preparing the ground for wars that might or might not happen. Infrastructure sabotage, elimination of local leadership, psychological attacks, and disinformation operations were all part of the same framework. Persistent reports describe missions in which Spetsnaz teams neutralized key figures before critical diplomatic negotiations, completely altering the balance of power without a single public shot being fired. To the world, abrupt political changes appeared spontaneous. To those behind the scenes, they were the result of precisely executed operations. In Western Europe, shaped by internal terrorism and historical trauma, Germany created a unit that would become a global reference. The GSG-9 was born from a humiliating failure and carried the burden of never being allowed to fail again. While some of its missions became publicly known, most of its work remained silent. In one particularly sensitive operation involving multiple countries and a deadline that allowed no negotiation, the unit acted in minutes. When it was over, a crisis that could have plunged Europe into chaos simply ceased to exist. The press received simplified explanations, governments breathed easier, and the operators returned to anonymity, fully aware that the clearest sign of success was the absence of questions. These units operate in a moral space where clear answers do not exist. Their members are trained to accept that right and wrong, in certain contexts, cease to be clean categories. Many lived double lives, hiding from their own families where they had been and what they had done. Some died without public honors. Others carried the psychological weight of irreversible decisions made in seconds. And yet, when states faced existential threats they could not acknowledge, it was these men and women who moved toward danger, knowing they would never receive recognition. As decades passed, the nature of invisible warfare continued to evolve. Drones replaced physical infiltrations in many scenarios. Cyber attacks began to cause damage equivalent to bombs. Lines of code became as lethal as bullets. But the underlying logic remained unchanged. There will always be moments when a state must act without admitting it has acted. There will always be decisions that cannot be debated in parliaments or explained to the public. And for those decisions, there will always be units trained to carry them out. Today, while the world debates open conflicts, international negotiations, and economic sanctions, operations continue far from the spotlight. Small teams cross invisible borders. Data is people are removed from the geopolitical game. None of this makes headlines, but its effects are felt for decades. Official history will continue to be written in books, with dates, treaties, and speeches. The other history, the one that truly determines the fate of nations, will continue to be whispered only behind closed doors, among those who understand that some victories cannot be celebrated. They can only be executed. And so, while you sleep, while governments speak, and while the world believes it understands why things happen, these units continue to operate in the shadows. Because the most uncomfortable truth of history is this: not all wars are won in plain sight. Some are won in absolute silence, by men and women who will never ask to be remembered. And as long as power, fear, and ambition exist, this invisible war will never end. In the next chapter of this hidden history, when eras and failures escaped control, we will see how secret operations went wrong and how their consequences nearly reshaped entire civilizations. History continues, even when no one is watching.